messing around on social media, just wasting time, procrastinating, not doing your actual job. For me, I have something in my head that from day one has told me people are going to be wasting their time while they're at work, not learning, not grinding, not getting further, and not providing 100% effort every day.
Hey, what's up, Dev Crew? Today we're here with Kyle St. Jean, who is a hungry, up and coming software developer. He's also on LinkedIn. I found him through LinkedIn, and he provides some raw, truthy posts about what software development is. Um, and it's been a pleasure to get to know him. We've been speaking for about 15 minutes or so. And Kyle, thanks for coming on today. Really,
Like,
really
yep,
excited to have you.
appreciate that, Tyler. Thanks for having me on.
So I've enjoyed a lot of your posts on LinkedIn, and that's how we connected. But can you tell us a little bit about your programming journey? When did you start developing? What got you into it? That stuff.
Not a problem. So this is now December of 2019, and I started thinking about IT as a transition from construction materials testing right around January. So at the beginning of this year, I decided I was going to try to take a Google IT support professional certification through Coursera and just try to start from the base level at a help desk position. I then was on a construction site in about February when I got an in-mail on my LinkedIn basically saying, yo, do you want to come be part of a sponsored coding boot camp? It's full-time, immersive, it's full stack. And I was like, that sounds insane. I don't think that's real. So then my wife and I found out through some research that it's actually real and it was a thing. So we basically took the venture of doing this 12-week, ended up being 13-week, 480 hour, 12 hours a day for me, 8 hours of class for everybody else, um, boot camp centered around a full stack web developer position that was going to be for the sponsoring company to hire. So we did that from March till about June. And then afterwards, I did not get accepted by that sponsor. Took about 2, 3 months to try to learn on my own. Then I was offered a job through a LinkedIn post that randomly got a guy to see it because his friend liked it. Super crazy story. And he approached me with the job opportunity that I now work on. So I now work as a remote Angular front end developer as a software engineer.
So I want to just highlight that for a second. We didn't talk about that before, but that's the power of networking. Some people disagree that networking is key to develop to getting jobs. I've talked to someone else recently, and he said he was saying how you just have to be good enough so people come and get you, right? So it's kind of like, have you
Absolutely.
heard of the book "So Good They Can't Ignore You"? And I think that's true, but while on the way there, you still have to get a job, right? So
You do. You still have to pay for bills. I don't know, but my wife survived for 6 months, not one of us working, when in order for us to move out to Arizona, where I now live, last year, 2018, we barely the closing costs of our house. Yeah, it's kind of crazy that all happened.
I think I think you're cutting out there, but you're saying I think you're saying that uh, getting the closing cost on your house was you barely made that work.
So apart about the cutting and whatnot, hopefully I'm good now. Yeah, going from not working for 6 months, being the sole provider for our household, basically no one in our house worked for 6 months, to then having just barely made our closing costs on our house in 2018. It was just crazy to be able to make the 6 months happen in the first place.
That's crazy, man. We are cutting out a little bit, but I hope it'll clear up. I think we'll be good enough. So that must have been really stressful for you. And um, so why, what kept you motivated to keep going when you didn't get that because it's pretty gut wrenching when you don't, like, at least for me, it's pretty gut wrenching when you like don't get something that you expect, right?
Yeah.
So were you expecting to like, it sounds like you're putting in 50% more time than most other developers in that camp. Were you really expecting to get that sponsorship position?
Yes, the sponsor told us they had people come from their company to come talk to our boot camp, which was about 23, 24 people. And there was another cohort from Texas doing the same thing. That sponsor came to talk to us and said, as long as you all put in your best effort and you provide us the result that we're looking for, you're all going to get positions. They only took one of us from our boot camp, and they gave the other three, four, maybe five people, I haven't kept up with them, QA tester roles. So that was not true. They all told us that as long as we follow the curriculum and we put in our best efforts and study outside of class, we should be no problem. You'll find that you'll get that job. And then later we found out in that boot camp that the position was actually going to be paying around 85K. Okay, so I'd be going from making $38,000 a year at construction materials testing, unsure of my schedule, et cetera, to a solid 85K. That was going to be world changing for us. And then once we got the news that only one of us was actually accepted, and it wasn't me, I was devastated. So was my wife. We went from basically being a shoe-in guarantee, we're going to get this $85,000 job. We're going to be finally able to make ends meet, maybe be able to have a nice dinner sometime, to being devastated, not knowing what we're going to do for money over the next 3 months.
Right. That's really tough. And I think, man, we could go off on into all the intricacies of that for hours.
Sure could.
But I think it's really cool that you persevered. So I guess this leads into, I want to talk a little bit about LinkedIn. Is this what led you to go onto LinkedIn? You're like, I got to do something else. Like, what were you thinking about starting putting yourself out there? Because you said you were able to get one of your posts noticed, and some of your posts get like 50 plus likes, and that's a lot on LinkedIn. Like, that's quite a bit.
Yeah.
So go a little bit into that.
Sure, of course I can. The thing that actually happened as far as LinkedIn goes is I started posting about that a month or two after I got out of that boot camp, because I had the mindset of, I cannot believe that this sponsor told 23 or 24 people who put their lives on hold for 480 hours of just class time, not even the amount of hours that we put in outside of class time, which for me totaled about 650 hours total, including the camp. I drove an hour every day to make that happen. And I had to walk a mile and a half to and from my car because it was in downtown Phoenix and I had to find free parking because we couldn't afford for me to pay for parking every day, right? So to go from that and then trying to figure everything else out, I was like, I got to tell people. I have to tell people that this is a reality. This is what's happening. And I figured, I didn't even look at LinkedIn as something where it was like, oh yeah, somebody will come help me out. No, I didn't expect that whatsoever.
So you're cutting out a little bit earlier, but just to recap, you went through some crazy stressful stuff, right?
Yes.
You guys, some crazy financial stuff. You got some promises that didn't fall through, and and on LinkedIn, you said, hey, I wanted to tell the world what's going on. You weren't expecting to get anything back. It's interesting too, because like, I would know that now. I would have known in your position like 3 years ago, but I think I would know a little bit better now. If a boot camp was saying we're going to hire 24 people, that's a crap ton of like junior, like, not that they're necessarily all junior level, but that's a crap ton of people that have to hire and then potentially have to train, like, just to say, yes, we're accepting all of you. So that's very, sorry, go ahead.
They told us that this was for a junior web developer position within a very substantial company. This is no small company. I won't mention them because that's just not smart. But this was a huge company, and they could afford to hire 24 people that were junior level. But this wasn't for a junior level. They didn't tell us this until the end, where it was actually a remote inside another company position as a mid-level developer. So they sold it as a junior web developer, no experience needed kind of boot camp. Let me tell you, it did not end up being that way. It was very much so geared towards a mid-level developer.
So would you still have accepted the opportunity had you known that? Would you been able to plan around that, or would you have not put that time into it in that way?
No, I would not have accepted it. If I had known that this was for an experienced developer to become a mid-level remote consultant inside another company position, absolutely not. Now, looking back on it, if I could have given myself advice, I would have a completely different path of attaining this goal of being hired as a junior developer, take those 650 hours or so that I put into that boot camp, still not have worked, but put that time in at home studying, and I could have been much better off. I could have had the job after 3 months for sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that with people. I hope that's a good Um, I hope that's a good reminder that it's harder. You can never trust things, even if
No,
they look good at the outset. So
no.
never trust an opportunity unless you have a contract in hand, and even then, you might want to set double guess it. So one of my favorite posts that you had on LinkedIn, talking about LinkedIn, was where um, you said, remember, like, let's all say it together. Junior dev is 0 years experience. And
I love
I,
that
I
post.
I agree with this, and I agree with this in principle in a lot of ways, because you were saying how people were reaching out to you for 2 to 3 years of experience, which is typically a lot of companies that could be considered just software developer or mid-level, if you want to call it that. So what led you to what led you to do that? How many recruiters were reaching out to you, saying that?
Wasn't even actually about the recruiters. Now it's about the recruiters because they constantly pester me. But that's not even, and it's illogical what they're asking for when they actually inbox me too. But the reason why that post existed was because I was looking through a bunch of job descriptions when I was applying for things, and once I finally got my job, I had a position to be able to kind of ease off a little bit and not complain. But um, I can't tell you how many times I've applied to a job that said junior software engineer, junior front end engineer, or developer, whatever, junior, right? And it said 2 to 3 years experience minimum. And I'm like, are you guys forgetting something? You don't get 2 3 years experience unless you get a job. Junior, just like if you're in a trade such as plumbing, means that you are just starting out, 0 to 2 to 3 years, depending on your competency and ability to succeed, just getting in. That junior role is there because you're new. And that's what needs to happen. You can't just sit there expecting 3 years of experience from somebody when they can't get the experience in the first place. It's
Right.
always that kind of chicken before the egg kind of situation where you're like, okay, well, how are people going to get the experience that you guys are all asking for? We have a crisis for mid-level developers and people with 3+ years experience out there, but nobody's able to get that experience because you won't hire us.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a problem. I think some of it's a filtering issue, and I think some of it's just uh, the whole hiring process is a big a big issue in and of
It
itself.
is.
So I've done another interview about that one, and uh,
Hmm.
maybe we could. I'm sure we'll see some follow up posts from you on that on that as well.
It's
Um,
different for every company, man. I know people are going to come out and say like, "Oh, you got to prove yourself," that kind of thing, or "Oh, every company's different." Yeah, but be realistic.
no, for sure. I think it's definitely an interesting problem. And I think that companies that innovate and find ways to find good talent like yourself that are very eager and hungry to learn and keep adapting is going to be how companies will survive and thrive in the future. Because there's, like you said, there's a mid-level, senior level crisis out there, for jobs, and people need to find people who can get up to that speed really quickly. So something else I've seen on your LinkedIn was that you said one of your goals is to become a senior level developer.
Yes.
And um, I guess we'll jump into the productivity stuff now. So you also mentioned the 40% rule, in one of your posts, and I was like,
Yes.
what's the 40% rule?
Hmm.
Is that what you're using as part of your way to get to this senior dev goal? And can you explain a little bit about that rule?
I can exactly. Yes. This comes from having watched Impact Theory, which is a podcast and YouTube channel, which is super awesome, run by Tom Bilyeu. And he had a guy named David Goggins on there. Go deep, go long form on finding out about David Goggins if you haven't already. But David Goggins has done every special operations uh, situation in the military that you can do and succeeded at doing them, right? And he's been through all of them. He's the only person to have done all that. And he has this mindset he talks about a lot, which is, I think he got it from the Marines when he was going through their stuff to become a SEAL, excuse me, a Navy SEAL, where they talk about your mind is going to be able to get to that 40% portion of your potential, and then you're either going to surpass that and get beyond your 40%, or you're just going to be at your 40 and quit, right? And that's what they're looking for when it comes to seals. You need to be able to push past that 40% and get beyond and see what you're actually made of, because that's where the rest of that 60% of your potential comes from. And that's something that I use exactly to try to navigate my way towards being a senior developer, because I don't want to just have to wait. Let's say it's 6 years, right, of time and experience professionally doing this before you can become a senior. I don't want to wait 6 years. If it means that I'm going to spend more hours of my day trying to grind and more of a centralized focus to be able to attain the skills in order to become a senior, that's what I'm after. So that's exactly what I'm looking for.
So that's a really interesting thing. Is the it's something I've thought a lot about. Is like how can, because I'm trying to do the same thing, right? I'm trying to get to my senior level. I've been doing this about 3 years. Um, I started an internship 3 years ago and been doing stuff off and on. But I've been a full stack dev from a junior role for like almost 2 years now. And do you think that there's any resources out there that can help you be more productive to get to that senior level role that you found? Like, is there
Hmm.
a curated way to do that? Because it's honestly, I haven't found a really good one.
It doesn't exist. It does not exist. And this is the reason why. Your needs as a full stack developer are different than mine. We're both devs, though, aren't we?
Hmm.
The stuff that I'm going to do day in and day out is going to be different than the things that you're going to do day in and day out. But we still have to be devs. Now, the important thing that for people, I think, and this is what I follow, to remember is that you need to find the 20% of the things that you have to know in order to accomplish 80% of your job. That's my primary focus right now. What's the 20% of the skills as an Angular front end dev um, that I have to know in order to get 80% of the things I do out of the way and taken care of and proficient? Um, and then from that point on, you fill out the last 80% of the things you need to know to fill out the last 20% of the things that you have to do, right? And those will just naturally happen as you go through things. There's no resources to help you do that because your own unique use case is completely special to you. I find that only through consistent and persistent researching are you going to be able to find it. And sometimes it's going to be that uncomfortable, welcome to being a developer kind of moment where it's like, you're just going to have to figure it out by playing with stuff
Yeah, I think that's almost every day as a developer, to tell you the truth. I
every day.
mean, almost no matter what your experience level is. I mean, it gets easier
Right.
over, like the problems get, the difficult problems can become different, right, over time. But um, and I think if you get too comfortable, you're probably not pushing yourself, like you're saying with the 40% rule. So
Yeah.
what is, so you mentioned the grind a lot. You have to grind, you have to put in the time when you get these jobs. Obviously, it sounds like you want to get and keep your job, right? Um, like you've got a good job now. You want to keep it. You're working remote as a entry level developer, or you just started your career, whatever you want to
Yes.
call it, right? Because titles are a joke anyway half the time. But
That's why I call
uh,
myself a software engineer. It just
yeah,
sounds sexy.
yeah, software engineer is great, right? It's better than like I've had web developer title,
Yes.
software intern title before, like horrible titles. I'm like, get me away from these.
Exactly.
um, but anyway, how do you um, how do you get yourself into a state to do the grind, right? Because the grind can be hard. It can be mentally exhausting.
It is.
What's pushing you?
So, what keeps me in the grind and staying with the grind is that I have an amazing wife who's been by my side through the last 3 years of our lives being together. And, she went through some health issues this last year and a half, especially, and she's finally, thank goodness, getting better. But I have her to take care of and the luxury of being able to take care of her, I'd like to reframe as, and I have the luxury of being able to take care of my 1.5-year-old son. So those are my primary motivations. Now, motivation is garbage. I think it's just like underwear. You have to change it every day, and you need to make sure you take care of yourself, and you have to have a true reason why drive. Now, if you need to know more about having a reason why, then go read the book Why. There's books out there that talk about having a strong reason why. But other than that, I keep myself focused on staying in the grind and being uncomfortable. And I think that's the most profound thing that I found along my journey of listening to podcasts and people who are true game changers and you know, thinkers that are really providing great content is that they're like, you just need to be uncomfortable. And you need to
Mhm.
get comfortable with the concept of being uncomfortable. If you're sitting there as a developer and you're like, yeah, I'm doing a bunch of stuff I already know how to do, you're in the wrong place.
Right.
You're in the wrong place. And if you're not changing things how they are and trying to get better or do something differently and challenging yourself, you're losing. That's the very reason why people grow old in their mind early when they start to age, is their mind is not active enough. It's not being challenged enough. And you need to keep those things active and keep challenging yourself so that way you can grow as a person. Your primary goal as a human being is to grow. Straight up. You feel uncomfortable or inadequate or things like this because it's human nature. That's your job in the tribe. You need to feel like you're contributing and you're valued and that you're growing, because that's how your tribe members um, provide you with value and results, right? So
Right.
I think the biggest thing about being in the grind is understanding that you have a goal. The reason why you want this goal is far more important than I want to be rich, and it's worth all the uncomfortable nights and the long nights of not getting much sleep and all the tasks that you're going to go through. And you need to make sure you have strong reasons.
That's awesome. Thanks for that. So, what does productivity feel like and mean to you, right? And when we're talking about productivity here, we're all talking about developer productivity, right?
Yeah.
What does that feel like to you?
Well, I think I recently saw something about a statistic of actually how much time a person in an office, for instance, spends actually doing work and being productive. Productivity for a programmer means I am I have my head in the code, I'm currently working on a task, and there is some sort of progress moving forward to accomplish the goal, and something will be done, and I'll push a PR through, and then, hey, I was productive, right?
Hmm.
Now, for typical workers, it's apparently something like 40% of your actual 8 hour period or however long you're going to work is actual productivity. Other stuff is socializing. Other stuff is, messing around on social media, just wasting time, procrastinating, not doing your actual job. For me, I have something in my head that from day one has told me people are going to be wasting their time while they're at work, not learning, not grinding, not getting further, and not providing 100% effort every day. If I stay focused and I stay on task and keep producing work, I will not only get further and grow faster than most people to get my senior level slash leadership level sooner,
Hmm.
but I'm also going to look better in terms of my employer and then our clientele who I'm serving. So I just keep working. And yes, I take mental breaks when I have to. If I know I just got stuck on a problem and it really taxed me mentally, I'm going to walk away. I'm going to look at my son. I'm going to be thankful that I get to see my wife and my baby every day. And maybe I'll go grab some chips and hummus and just like have a chill for a sec. But then I'm right back to work, right? Because most people dodge working. And I love what I do. I want to get my head back in the problems and I want to get back into growing and doing things. So that's kind of just what I focus on. Productivity to me means that I spent my 8 hours and they got my 8 hours. I don't want to be paid for 8 hours of work at my hourly rate and not actually give them 8 hours of quality work. So
Yeah.
my first month and a half of doing this remotely, nobody's looking at me. First of all, as a remote worker, nobody's watching you but you. So you have to be held liable to your own actions, having the
Yeah.
integrity of knowing I'm working. So for the first month and a half, I didn't even know I was supposed to take a lunch, bro. I didn't take a lunch. I just ate at my desk, which was a kitchen table and an uncomfortable chair up until recently. I just kept working. And then I heard my coworker, he's like, "Hey, I'm at lunch. I'm going to be back in like 45." I'm like, "What? What? You take a lunch? I didn't know." Because when you're a
Yeah.
construction materials tester, this is something I learned from that. You might have a 17-hour day. You're never guaranteed a time to eat. You better eat while you're driving to the next spot to do your job. So that's my mindset. I just know I got to keep working. I got to keep grinding. There's more stuff to do, man.
Yeah. I think I agree with all that stuff. I think it's interesting too. I wonder, obviously some developers, some jobs make you work 60-hour weeks. And I wonder
Right.
how many developers are just wasting, 4 or 5, 6 hours of those days, because they can't, like, it's hard to mentally do that over and over again,
It
right?
is.
And actually track your time, because that's something I actually do. I actually track my productive time, and most people don't do that. They have no idea how much time they waste during the day. So
They don't.
um, um, it's an interesting thing. I really like that philosophy. So what's your favorite tool, productivity tool, be it a IDE or what's some tool that you use maybe on a daily or weekly basis that helps you to be more productive?
Um, Well, the only tools that I technically use are VS Code, and then we use Azure DevOps for our all of our DevOps needs and tasks and Scrum stuff. Um, so this isn't necessarily by choice, but I use my VS Code and my DevOps stuff quite a bit. That's pretty much my whole day, and those are quite valuable. In terms of tools to stay productive, I it's going to sound cheesy, but it's the truth. And that your greatest tool is your mind, because when I get to that situation where I'm like, I just want to mess around, I'm going to go on LinkedIn for like a half hour. I catch myself and I'm like, no, there's stuff to do, bro. Let's just get it. Take a little mental break, be sane about it, but let's take that mental break and get back to it.
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot of tools that I actually use. It's mostly just me trying to find things out and trying to think my way through problems.
That's awesome. I love that response. I'm gonna have to. That might be what we put at the beginning of this video, because I think that encapsulates one of the best things you can do. So that's really cool. So, do you have any favorite techniques or paradigms? I guess we kind of maybe touched on that. Is there anything else, other techniques for staying productive that you use?
Um, I don't follow this religiously, but I appreciate the topic at least of the Pomodoro technique of like basically being, 20 minutes on of work, highly focused work, and then maybe 5 minutes or 4 minutes of just like not work stuff, kind of just chilling. That'd be like you're surfing LinkedIn, watching some YouTube, looking at cat videos, whatever, dude. But just something that's not your work that's straining your mind. So I keep that in mind. But there's some times where like if I'm really into something, I'll sit there starting the venture at 10 a.m. and look up and I'm like, oh, I forgot to eat lunch and it's 2 o'clock. I guess I'm done for the day. Awkward. Okay, so I mean, the thing is like, I like the Pomodoro technique because it forces you to take breaks. But if you're in a groove and you're in that what entrepreneurs will call a flow state, don't leave it. Don't.
Right.
This flow state's a big thing with me, where that's kind of a thing where it's trying to get into a flow state and then staying in a flow state to be highly productive.
Yeah, I think that is a really good key, because when I have that, when I'm like working well or I'm working at night or whatever, I'm like I tell my wife, I'm like, I'm in flow. I need to just keep going,
You
because
can't stop.
yeah, because it's like sometimes it's hard to get into the grind, right? It's hard to get into the. I wish this is where um I hope that employers recognize this more, because I've had this talk with this to a coworker before, and it's easy to, sometimes people work better at 2 a.m. I'm not saying that's the best time to work, but
Right.
some people work better then. It's like, why not let them work at 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. and bust out a bunch of code when they're here from 9 to 5 and they bust out half as much? You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
um, that's really cool too. So, what's your most talking about that? What's your most productive? When are you most productive? I guess time of day, mindset. You talked about flow state, right? Which I think flow state's definitely really important. But when do you notice that you're most productive?
Uh, I used to be far more productive and capable of thinking clearly and better with my mindset when it was, later in the day towards 8 p.m. But once I had my son, that I got forced to be on a schedule of sleeping around 9 p.m. until whenever he wakes up, which now is at 5 a.m. or so. So I wake up and I get to work at 6 a.m. And my most productive times at this point are um, probably between 7:30 a.m. and noon, just through sheer force, I guess, which is I basically told my brain I've got this period of time to really get my stuff done, and that's the best time period that I'm gonna have to do it. So let's get in flow states. Let's learn how to motivate myself and find that focused mindset, and then make it that time. Because from 6 a.m. until our scrum call in the morning at about 7:15 a.m. for me, I'm trying to get myself ramped up and into that flow state, do the mental work, and do the processes I need to do in order to get there, and then it's grind time.
That's awesome. So that reminds me of Deep Work. Have you heard of that book before?
Yes.
Yeah. So he talks about it's kind of like a 4 hour block or so
Hmm.
of time. Uh, because we were talking earlier about how, like, what's the most how much productive time can you get out of a day, right?
Yes.
And he talks about maybe 4 hours might be the max for just like full on 100% all in. Your brain's cranking away.
Right.
So I guess the last question I have is, what's the best advice you've received on productivity before?
My boot camp instructor was very intuitive. He honestly didn't get enough credit for what he did because he taught me something very smart, which was understanding your cognitive capacity, which is understanding that at some point you're going to have taken in more information than your brain can legitimately process at that point, and that's when you start feeling like you're tired and your brain's really overworked and you're starting to zombify out. And understanding that concept of like you've already gone through your cognitive capacity for the day, you're probably either going to need to start writing stuff down so you can look at it again tomorrow, or just admit to the people around you like, hey, I've taken in as much information as I can today. I'm probably not going to retain everything that's now being said. I'm going to do my best, but hey, that's a thing. So if it was anything for people to understand about themselves, if you've only got a certain amount of space in your brain that you can take up, then you need to go to sleep, let it download into your memory, and put it into practice over time to then make it a stuck kind of skill or thought process, right? So understanding that you're only going to get so much in. So make that stuff count and understand what happens when something important comes up that's already maxing out your cognitive capacity.
Awesome, man. That's some great advice to leave us off with. So, if people liked how you speak and your mindset and everything like that, how can they follow you to get more of your great advice and perspective?
Well, I appreciate that. I think the best place and only place right now for me is on LinkedIn. If you do the whole LinkedIn search for profiles, you can find me at /KSJ Phoenix or KSJPHX, which is just Kyle St. Jean Phoenix. You can find me through that, and then eventually I'll actually start posting videos to talk about this kind of stuff, either through YouTube and posting that through LinkedIn as well.
Awesome, awesome. And you also did a podcast recently on finances, and you go in a little bit more into your financial struggle,
Right.
correct?
Yeah.
So people can find that on your post as well.
Yes, in my LinkedIn, throughout some of my most recent stuff, you can find that post made by my buddy Lucas, who it was his podcast, and you can check that out if you want to hear more about that financial struggle. He puts on a great podcast for people, especially within the tech industry, about managing finances and the struggles of how that all goes. So feel free to check that out if you'd like.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on, Kyle. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Appreciate that, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
See ya.